Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/audio.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Now, if you like our show, be sure and check out our Patreon. Everything here Monday to Friday on AM/FM radio you can find at the Patreon with all the ads and the commercials cut out, plus a lot of exclusive content. I just did an interview with some guy, this YouTuber, about the West Memphis 3 and P. Diddy and stuff like that, and we just put that up there in the Patreon too. All kind of court documents we always have added up there as well. A lot of exclusive content. And then, of course, all the archives are free at Spreaker.com. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when we put up new content. And I used to do a live show there every Friday night. And now we're trying to find a home for that because they no longer offer live broadcasting on Spreaker. But we'll figure it out. It's probably going to be on Patreon. Got a returning guest today, Caitlin Rother. You can find her at CaitlinRother.com, ROTHER. The book we're talking about today is Body Parts, A Serial Killer's Deadly Compulsions. And you can find her on Twitter and Instagram at The Real Caitlin Rother. And Caitlin Rother, remind the audience, who is Caitlin Rother?
Well, thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I am a New York Times bestselling author of 15 books. I worked in newspapers as an investigative reporter for almost 20 years before I quit the business to be a full-time author, which was always my dream. I am primarily, up until this point, have been known for my nonfiction crime books, but I do have one novel, Naked Addiction, which I wrote many years ago. But I just got a 2-book deal with Thomas & Mercer to write a new crime series of thrillers. So I'm really excited about that. So now I'm really true crime and thriller and memoir. That's what I write. So if you don't like one genre, you can find something in the other.
The only thing left untouched is cookbooks, right?
I don't think I'll be doing cookbooks. But it's funny. I used to post a lot of photos of my meals that I cook, clean meals. I have various dietary restrictions, and I try to be as creative as I can. And I have actually had people on Facebook to ask me to write cookbooks, but I'm like, I don't think so.
Well, maybe we can co-author on a cookbook. I had you on here once talking about that story, Death on Ocean Boulevard. Hasn't there been some kind of recent updates in that story?
Well, there could be, but there hasn't been. So basically, I'll just give you a quick update since the book came out. Where we left it in the book is that Adam Shacknai basically came out of a wrongful death trial being held responsible for Rebecca Zahau's death in Coronado at the Spreckles Mansion back in 2011. He maintains his innocence. He wanted to appeal, but his insurance company didn't want to spend the money on an appeal, so they basically settled with the Zahau family, who believes that Adam Shacknai murdered Rebecca Zahau. Just quickly, Rebecca Zahau was found by Adam Shacknai allegedly hanging naked, bound, and gagged in the rear courtyard of the Spreckles Mansion. He called 911, and on the tape you can hear him dragging a table over, a 3-legged table because one of the legs fell off, stood on top of it, and supposedly cut her down. So when the first responders arrived, she was on the ground. So anyway, there was a lot of information that was presented at the trial by the Zahau family's attorney that pointed toward murder, but the sheriff's department maintains that it was a suicide. So to this day, since then, the Zahau family filed a lawsuit against the sheriff's department trying to get documents emails, anything at all that could have pointed to the department hiding theories or detectives who thought that it was murder, but these were squashed. They ended up having to withdraw that because the judge was about to rule against them. Since then, the Zahau family's attorney has filed a petition with the medical examiner's office trying to get them to change the determination of suicide and change it to homicide or undetermined. Medical examiner's office took their sweet time and ultimately, after at least a year, said no. So what they supposedly were going to do is go back to court and try to put it before another judge because they believe that they presented enough information to convince the jury there. And the judge at the time made some comments that challenged the suicide determination by the sheriff's department and by the medical examiner's office. But they have not done that. So either they don't want to spend any more money, they ran out of steam. But they said that was going to be their next step, but they have not done that. So at this point, it's pretty much just status quo.
And with all the money this Jonah Shackney has, I'm sure he's able to put a lot of monkey wrenches into those wheels, slow them down.
Well, that's what the Zahau family claimed. He denied that. The sheriff denied that there was any hanky-panky there, no political pressure. I found nothing in the campaign reports, but the sheriff had no money coming from the Shackneys, so there was nothing at least publicly identifiable, but the Zahau family was constantly accusing the sheriff's department of, favoritism with the rich family and corruption, but there was no evidence of that other than their accusations.
Gotcha. Okay, so Body Parts, a serial killer's deadly compulsions. It's coming out February 25th, 2025. Yeah. So it's not even, I usually say the ink's not dry yet. This one's not even printed yet. I still have the printers over there waiting to be released.
But it is available for pre-order. So Anybody can hop on and grab a trade paperback pre-order. I just want to caution people, though, that if they order the Kindle version, they will not get the updated version until this book actually comes out. So if you want to wait for the Kindle version, you need to wait for February 25th.
Gotcha. So why don't you give us
and the audio version as well.
Oh, who's doing the audio for you?
Sorry.
Are you reading it?
I have my publishers do this, but most of my books that are out in audio are with Tantor, or they're on Audible usually.
Huh. Yeah, I think you would do good if you did the audio yourself, if you did the narration.
Well, thank you, but nobody's ever asked me if I want to. And they get professional actors and actresses to do these things. So if it were a memoir, maybe someone would ask me.
Yeah, there you go. So Body Parts of Serial Killers, why don't you give us an overview of the book and then give us the updated stuff that you've been working on?
Okay, so the original book came out in 2009, and this is an updated version. So there's 32 pages, 10,000 words of new developments. Now, I've updated some of my other books in the past, but never with this much new material. So I had a lot to say. So basically, the book's been out of print. You could get it in audio or ebook this whole time, but the new material is basically about the identification of this serial killer's first victim. So let me give you a little background on him first. Wayne Adam Ford was a long haul trucker. He's been on death row since he was convicted. And just briefly, in California, Governor Newsom has basically disassembled death row. So I don't even really know technically if these men are still considered to be on death row because they're no longer at San Quentin where death row physically was located. They've basically taken inmates who are mostly men, out of death row and they've moved them into other state prisons. So they're all these inmates are, I think, pretty happy about it because they get more freedom. They get to do more activities. They get to, not be in their cell by themselves all the time. Anyway, so Wayne Adam Ford is technically, I think, still on death row, but he is now in a prison in San Luis Obispo. Anyway, his case became national news. He turned himself in. So he is the only serial killer that I've ever heard of. I can't say he's the only one, period, because I don't know that. But he's the only one who ever turned himself in. So after killing and torturing women during rough sex, now during the interviews with the detectives after he turned himself in, he said there were probably 50 women that he had basically picked up, most of them prostitutes. Many of them, if they weren't prostitutes or they were prostitutes, they were, had serious issues with drugs or other emotional issues, mental illness. These were vulnerable women, and he was a predator. But he did know that what he was doing was wrong. But he said that he picked them up, and they started to have sex, and then he would start choking them. And then he would bring them back with CPR and do it again. And then these 4 women didn't make it back. Therefore, he did it by accident. I'm like, okay, maybe that happened the first time it was an accident, maybe possibly the second time. But if you keep doing this and you realize you're killing these women, it's no longer an accident. So anyway, but he did know that it was wrong. He said he was disgusted by it, and he turned himself in. He called up his brother. He said, I need your help, because he knew that he would try to back out, which he did, but his brother made him go. He turned himself in, and he had a woman's breast in his pocket in a baggie. So basically, he dismembered 2 of his victims. His first one, and this is the one in the updated material, who was finally identified 25 years later, he dismembered her, and he put her body parts into the banks of a river, and the torso ended up in what's called a slough. I've never seen a slough. I don't really know what it is, but it sort of seems maybe like a brackish, swampy kind of area, and it flows out into the ocean. They found one of her arms at the ocean at the end of the trail, and they didn't find the rest of her. So they didn't know who she was. They could tell that she was approximately 25 years old. He gave a few details about her, that she didn't seem all there, that she was either on drugs, and he found some stuff in her backpack he thought looked like heroin, and she had a funny nickname, and she wasn't getting along with her parents, and that's pretty much what he told the detectives. So he did try to help them find the body parts. He took them to the place where he buried her head and other parts under a cement slab, but they weren't there anymore. They had clearly just been taken by the currents. So anyway, 25 years later, they formed a cold case unit at the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department, which is a small department. They don't have much funding. And that's an area where there's a lot of missing people and unidentified remains that are found, because it's a pretty heavy drug area. They grow a lot of pot up there, and they grow. Yeah, so that's like the Emerald Triangle and these various counties up there.
We actually did a show about this guy. He went missing up there, but he was up there working for the growers, and
right.
Yeah,
a lot of people go who are involved in the drug trade.
Yeah, and it was all covered up too by the sheriffs, and they wouldn't even let the sheriffs search the farm. Okay, that's how much that thing was covered up. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
But anyway, so this young woman, she had some issues as well. I interviewed her sister, and I interviewed her cousin. Now, her cousin is the reason that she was actually identified. He and his sisters were into this genealogy stuff, that they have on these days in 23andMe, Ancestry.com, whatever. People are, going online, they're submitting their spit in a vial, and next thing you know, they're tracing unknown relatives, right? So this is how the Golden State Killer was identified, through these kinds of websites. So knowing that, this guy, Jeffrey Cummings, submitted his DNA to GED Match. So he'd already submitted it to one of those other websites, but GED Match is different. They actually have a way for you to say, yes, I agree to have law enforcement use my DNA to help solve crimes, because you have to give your approval. There was a big backlash earlier in the industry. So basically that helped, because he was now in this database And so when the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department started trying to solve this case, they went and they found this Jeffrey Cummings guy by, putting in this unidentified torso tissue. They developed a DNA profile from that, and they got a match, right? And so they called him up and, do you have a missing person in your family, blah, blah, blah. And then they went to the sister, got the sister to give the DNA to make sure, to confirm. And then that's how they identified Carrie Ann Cummings 25 years after she had gone missing. Her family didn't know what had happened to her. She had had some mental issues. She had been taking drugs, and she, they tried to report her missing in Tucson, where the family was living. But because she was using drugs, the police department wouldn't take a missing persons report because they said, oh, she's voluntarily missing. So it's unfortunate because, this woman could have been identified many years earlier, but the police department wouldn't even take a report. So that's sad. But anyway, 25 years later, the family now has closure. They know what happened to her, and she has her name back, which I think makes me feel good because, the family was just so open with me. And, oftentimes when you write a book, people are, I've had all kinds of accusations of it. I'm a predator for, capitalizing on people's tragedies and this and that. And these people were happy. And I've had emails from other people, other family members in this book from some of the other victims that they thanked me. And what I also found really rewarding was that this sister, before she even knew that they had identified her sister, she had a voicemail on her phone from one of the cold case detectives, and they said that they were calling from Eureka. So she did Google, found my book, read my book 3 times, and she's like, that's my sister. So before she even knew for sure that was, they'd told her by phone that this was her sister before she'd had her DNA tested to get it matched. She figured out by reading my book and the details that I had about her that was her sister. And so that was really rewarding for me, considering I can get personally attacked sometimes for writing these books.
What inspired her to seek out your book? She could have known the connection before she read the book.
She didn't know the connection. She didn't know where her sister was.
So just like a wild coincidence, she's reading your book and says, oh my God, this is my sister?
No. She found my book because she Googled Eureka and found the case with Wayne Adam Ford where he turned himself in with a breast in his pocket. He was a serial killer. There was an unidentified, she found news stories about the case and ended up finding my book and then reading my book.
Gotcha. So it says here
it was a national case. It was a national case because the father, Ford's father, told me that he turned down an interview request by Dan Rather. So and talked to me. I was happy about that. He didn't talk to Dan Rather.
So it says that she was traveling. She was going to the rainbow gatherings. Do you know where she was going?
Well, that was earlier, some years earlier, but that's how she got into drugs, and she was doing psychedelics and various other things. And then she developed what appeared to be, possibly schizophrenic symptoms. So, sometimes it's difficult when you take drugs. Some of these drugs end up mimicking mental conditions like that. And so, like with meth also mimics schizophrenia if you keep taking it, and you get off it and those symptoms go away. But, so it's unclear. Was this mental illness or was this drugs that brought on symptoms that were similar,
Yeah, hopefully it goes away. These guys, when they get this meth psychosis, man, that'll change you for the rest of your life. Forget it. So,
yes.
Once again, who is Ford? Ford is the guy who.
Wayne Adam Ford is the serial killer. Gotcha. He killed these 4 women. And he was the trucker, and he's the one who was raping and killing these women and then dumping their bodies in bodies of water. So 2 of them ended up in the California aqueduct. One of them was in a ditch, and one of them was in this slough. So he killed them, and he'd keep their bodies in his truck, and then he would dump them many miles away from where he picked them up. So it wasn't, and these were not women whose who, they were troubled women. They were prostitutes. It wasn't like, they had families who were necessarily going to report them missing.
Do we know what it was about Ford's childhood or his upbringing that brought him to this condition?
Yeah, I have a lot of that actually in the book, interviewing his father and his mother. And also I had excerpts that the defense investigator did an 8-hour interview with his mother. So his mother had a lot of mental issues as well. She tried to kill herself several times. One time when the older brother, Rodney, he was 9, he found his mother in the kitchen, basically gash in her arm and her wrist from a tuna can lid, cut herself. But she had tried before that to kill herself with pills, apparently, even though she kind of denies it. So she's allegedly, we don't know, I don't know for sure, I couldn't confirm this, but she's allegedly bipolar. And then the father was very aggressive, according to the mother and according to other stories that I'd got in my research. He was in Army intelligence, and so he was away a lot, and so they were living in the Army barracks, and the mom would be having sex with various people. And anyway, at one point she told Wayne, Adam Ford, her youngest son, that he was the product of rape, that his father had raped her to produce him. So, he really had a rough time growing up. He was also, seemed very sensitive as a child and had a lot of, emotional issues. And anyway, when he got older, he went into the military. He went into the Marines. And, I have written a number of books about people who are in the military, which trains people to kill, and then they learn how to kill people. They go out and they kill other people. I'm not to say that everybody in the military is going to go kill somebody, but that's what they're trained to do, right? So it ends up drawing some of these people in, and I've written several books with killers who were trained in the military. So this guy was, and while he was in the military, he took first aid, and he took some other courses where he learned that the carotid artery, if you press on it, it can cut off oxygen to the brain. But as he found, he was on a date with a woman he later married, and he saw this car accident victim, collision victim on the side of the road, was bleeding from the neck. He went over there and tried to help, held his hand on the guy's neck, and while he was trying to stop the bleeding of this guy, some drunk driver hit him and knocked him 80 feet down the embankment, and he ended up in the ICU for 9 days for trying to help somebody. But ironically, he was helping to stop the bleeding and from this guy to die. But that's how he ended up, choking and torturing these women later in life by cutting off their oxygen, while he was having sex with them. So anyway, after that, so I had a severe brain injury on top of everything else. And he's got a whole list of what are called paraphilias, which I learned about writing this book. It's like fetishes times 100, And I won't go into all the details, but they're all in the book. Some of the stuff he did is so gross that I don't even like to say it out loud. Some of the stuff he did is really twisted. So
he was married at least one time, more than one marriage? Twice.
Married twice, and he, the thing that came up a lot during his interviews with these police, sheriff's department detectives from 4 different counties, because he killed women and he dumped them in 4 different counties. The trial was in San Bernardino County, where one of the victims was from. They consolidated them all into one case. He kept saying, he missed his little boy, so he had a son with one of these women. And he ended up just, playing. He saw himself as the victim, and he was crying and crying about how he didn't get to see his son anymore. And but he just, when you read the book, you'll see it was clearly, partly his fault. He drank. He had a lot of mental issues. And so he was not a stable person, and he wasn't around. And he, did these weird things to women, and, he's just acted very bizarrely.
So the courts didn't allow him to even visit his child?
No, it wasn't that, but that's how he saw it. And so he didn't really, it seems like he didn't try that hard. Like, he could have tried harder to see him. So it wasn't, in his mind, he couldn't see his son. But I don't remember it being that clear cut in the custody agreement. I mean, he definitely did not have custody of him. But he could still visit, I think, if he wanted, but he just ended up not. And in his mind, he was a victim.
Gotcha. Now, he's still alive today. Did you get a chance to talk to him in prison?
He didn't want to. And recently, for the update, I tried again, and we were emailing, basically, but he just didn't see, he said he didn't see any point. So, okay, that's, if you say so. He said he didn't read the book either, so he doesn't even know. So it wasn't like he had anything against me, but he just didn't want to do it. He didn't see any point, so I couldn't make him.
Yeah,
But I got plenty of information. I mean, he testified for days. Not testified. I'm sorry. He gave interviews to these detectives, and I have all the transcripts, and I have audio, and I listened to him, and he's a mess. The guy was just a mess. And I got plenty of information, plenty of details that he'd already given during those interviews. I interviewed his brother. I interviewed his father for 2 days in a hotel room. So, I mean, I have so much information about him. Plus, other people were interviewed by detectives. I had a ton of information that I was able to present it without talking to him, honestly. I don't know that it would have really added anything.
Is he one of those death row inmates that gets a lot of fan mail and attention by the public?
I don't think so. I don't think that many people know about this case. I mean, because it was 1998 when he turned himself in. It took a long time to get to trial. And there were people at I went to the sentencing because I didn't find out about this until the death penalty portion of the whole thing. So I went to the death penalty trial, which was short, and then the sentencing, and I tried to interview some of the victims' families, but they, one of them wanted money, and the other ones were just too upset. So I interviewed the prosecutor, I interviewed the judge, I interviewed the defense investigator. I had so much information. I had more information than I could ever use.
Now, you started off saying that he turned himself in and he confessed. How come it still went to trial?
Well, because like I said, he was a mess when he turned himself in. He said he wanted a lawyer, but he kept talking. So that became an issue. It went to, that once the defense attorneys got involved, he turned himself in Humboldt County, where they don't really send people to death row much. And the trial ended up being in San Bernardino County, where they are the third or fourth county in the state in terms of numbers to send their defendants to death row. So he turned himself in a liberal county and ended up in one of the most conservative counties when he had the trial. They did end up throwing out some of his interviews with these detectives because he said he wanted an attorney and they kept talking to him, but he kept talking. So it was one of those tricky things, So, but it did still go to trial because even though he admitted to a lot of this stuff, he still, pled not guilty, and he obviously had mental defects. So it went to trial because he murdered 4 people.
Right. And I guess they were able to suppress the confessions due to his asking for a lawyer. And
well, a few of them, but a lot of them still got in.
Some still got in. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess then the other portion of the trial was the sentencing phase, right? The penalty phase.
Uh-huh. Well, the penalty phase and the sentencing are two different things, but yes.
So what other psychological issues was he diagnosed with?
There's a lot of them. Let me find them here. I have a list of them. These paraphilias, he, let's see. He had recurrent and chronic major depressive disorder with psychotic features, which would still cause depression even if he was taking meds. He was an alcoholic. He had 3 out of 10 possible personality disorders: antisocial, borderline, and what's called NOS, not otherwise specified, meaning that you have features of certain disorders, but not the whole, not all of them in order to be diagnosed with that. He was dependent on others, narcissistic, self-defeating, which is masochism. So he liked to hurt women during sex, and he also liked to be hurt. He lacked empathy. He had a strong sense of entitlement, and he exploited women. So these paraphilias, in addition, exhibitionism, the sexual masochism and sadism, and voyeurism. But the one that was the most bizarre to me is something called pickerism, Picquerism. And that is when you get sexually aroused by sticking needles into a body part, which is just like, how bizarre is that? But he did that. He did that even with his wife, who clearly consented to it, probably felt manipulated into it. But, I mean, just he would have sex with her, cut holes in a sheet so that her breasts were exposed. I mean, he just was really obsessed with breasts, which is why, he ends up turning himself in with this woman's breast in his pocket. It was his last victim. And he apparently cut her breast off because he needed to make her, I can't remember. It's something to do with when he was trying to dispose of the body, he had to cut it off in order to do what he needed to do to get her into the aqueduct or whatever. It wasn't like he held on to it. I don't know this for sure, but this is what he claimed, that he needed to cut it off. But the first one that he dismembered, he panicked, apparently, cut her up in his bathtub. But anyway, he also had what's known as partialism, which is intense focus on one body part, which in his case was breasts, and erotic asphyxia. So that's when you choke yourself or your partner during sex, again, pressing on the carotid artery to cut the oxygen off to the brain, because supposedly that can enhance your orgasm. Now, so he claimed that this was for the women's pleasure, when clearly choking someone into unconsciousness is not something that any of these women signed up for, even if they're prostitutes. And choking them, and he would torture them and do things with them that I don't even want to talk about because they, to cause pain. I don't even want to describe it.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah. Coincidentally, I played an interview with David Carradine's ex-wife, and that's how that was the cause of his death. Yeah. It was But
he did that consensually to himself, and sometimes people screw it up and die doing that. But so this guy is claiming, it was an accident, but this is after he choked them out like 3 or 4 times and brought them back. Imagine those women and how horrifying that must be to have someone choke you and then you're alive again. The guy's still raping you and he does it 4 times. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than that except being burned alive or, I don't know. I have another case that I wrote a book about, the Tom and Jackie Hawks murder, where they were tied to an anchor and thrown overboard alive. Oh, God. That must have been pretty horrible as well, but this was pretty bad too.
Let me ask you this. These ex-wives, right, they never had any kind of suspicions? Obviously, he's preoccupied with all this kind of craziness. They never had any suspicions that this guy's out there doing this?
Well, he wasn't married to him anymore.
So he didn't start doing the murders till after his divorces?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we've been talking to Caitlin Rother. You can find her at CaitlinRother.com. The book is Body Parts, A Serial Killer's Deadly Compulsions. Now, Caitlin, you're writing a book now, too, about the McStays is about to come out?
Yes, I have been working on this for, 12 years. The McStays went missing. It's a family of 4. Joseph and Summer were the parents, and their 2 small boys. They were 3 and 4 years old. Gianni and Joseph Jr. They went missing from their house in Fallbrook, which is in San Diego County, where I live. And a couple weeks later, Joseph's brother, Michael, reported them missing. and they came into the house and they saw that there was breakfast food left out on the counter, coffee in the coffee pot, partially eaten breakfast on plates. There was some popcorn on a futon where the two little boys would hang out. Summer left her prescription glasses, which she always wore and she couldn't see to drive at night. And they left their dogs in the backyard with no food and no water. So it was as if they just suddenly vanished, and so it was very bizarre. And the remaining family members did not live nearby. The mom, the brother, and the stepfather lived in Texas. So they were all kind of involved in trying to help with the investigation, but they had talked to them like a day or two before they disappeared, and they all said, well, this is not like them, although initially they didn't really know. Maybe they went on a vacation, didn't tell anyone. Maybe they just didn't like to answer his phone all the time. But by the same token, he had this business that he needed to run, making water fountains. So long story short, there were two business associates that he worked closely with, and I don't want to talk in too much detail because hopefully we can talk again closer to the time that the book comes out. But one of those business associates ended up being convicted, and so my book basically goes into the two investigations. One is the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, and very similarly to the Rebecca Zahau case, which was also investigated by the same Sheriff's Department, the defense is claiming confirmation bias, which is what the Zahau family claimed in the Zahau case, which is that you come into a case and you decide that one person did it, or you have a theory, and no matter what evidence comes into the contrary, or that you can't support the evidence you have with any evidence, more evidence, they won't budge. So in the first case, the detective from the San Diego Sheriff's Department investigated this as a missing persons case, and he was convinced that they had gone voluntarily to Mexico. Well, he gave up, said, I'm going to hand this case over to the FBI, which he logistically never actually did. He said he did, but they never even got any of the case files. 8 months later, this family's bodies, their remains, skeletal remains, were found in two shallow graves in the Mojave Desert, also known as the High Desert here in California, out in San Bernardino County. And coincidentally, the same judge that tried Wayne Adam Ford also presided over this trial. So the book basically goes into the flaws in the both investigations by the San Diego and San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, and the trial where there were big holes in the prosecution's case as a result, and this man was convicted. I don't have an opinion. I don't put a position into the book because I never do, but the defense claimed that they had the wrong guy and that the other business associate had just as much, if not more, of the exact same motive to kill this family.
Oh, that's interesting, because I told you, I did an interview about that case years ago. I think it was the father or the father-in-law, something like that.
The stepfather, Patrick McStay, yes.
Probably. It was so long ago, I don't really remember.
He's done a lot of media, but they never called him to testify.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's some interesting information about why that probably is in my book, which I won't go into right now.
Do you have a title for that book yet?
Yes, it's called Down to the Bone.
You got this bone, body parts bone, down to the bone. Okay. All right. By Caitlin.
Where's the bone in body parts? There's no bone in body parts.
Well, you know what? You're right. Down to the bone. Okay.
Well, I mean, that people have bones. We all have bones. But, this is down to the bone because they found their skeletal remains and all that was left was their bones.
Yeah.
And it's also getting down to the bone is kind of a metaphor for getting to the bottom of something,
How old were those kids?
3 and 4.
Ah.
And they had holes in the back of their skulls. So when they found their skulls, all the family had holes in the back of their skulls as if they were hit with a blunt object. And they found a small sledgehammer in one of the graves. So they think that's what was used to kill them.
That's just heartbreaking. And you would think there would be some kind of DNA.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's
Go ahead.
Horrific. You would think there would be some kind of DNA in that case, though, right? It's a bloody.
Well, that is the defense. One of the things that the defense claimed all the way through the trial, which was very frustrating for them. They sent some of these items that were found in the grave through this, more advanced DNA process than when these things were initially collected, because this case took a long time. From the disappearance. And when they were actually buried out there, probably 2010, it didn't get to trial until 2019. So in all that time, they tested some of these items that were found in the grave, and they found several items that they found enough DNA that they used a special type of technology that I can't pronounce right now because I'm not talking about this book. Yeah. But anyway, there was DNA that was supposedly found that did not match the guy who went to death row, and it didn't match any of the family either, which raises a whole lot of questions, but the judge would never really let them pursue that. So that's still up in the air at this point.
Gotcha. We've been talking to Caitlin Rother. You can find her at CaitlinRother.com. The book we've been talking about today is Body Parts, A Serial Killer's Deadly Compulsions. But go back into the archives and check out the interview we did on Death on Ocean Boulevard inside the Coronado Mansion case. That was a great interview. Caitlin Rother, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.